began the first talk of the South Yorkshire survey. This is really part 2 with this slide, just to remind you where South Yorkshire is, with Barnsley, Doncaster, Rotherham and Sheffield. And you'll see that Doncaster's as big as Sheffield and Rotherham together. And it's been a real challenge to actually try and find some buildings, you might be surprised, that are actually 17th century, worth recording. But we have done, and we've even got some medieval ones as well, which is quite amazing. But tonight it's about the Sheffield area. So that's what we're going to move on to. So here we have the map of South Yorkshire showing the roads that run through them, the M1 and the A1M running north to south-ish, and joined by the M18 linking through. It just is helping you to understand where these are. And we surveyed Barnsley, as you can see, in 2017. Doesn't that sound a long time ago? I think it does. Rotherham 2018, Sheffield 2019. Doncaster was scheduled for 2020. Lots of things that we planned have fallen through. We were going to record a lovely timber frame building, but sadly the owner had died, and the person who's inherited it lives in America, and it's not very straightforward trying to get permission to record it anymore. So things have changed and moved on a bit, and so we've been challenged to find more buildings, and we've gone on Reckies to do that with my good friend Kevin and Lorraine. So we'll move on. The archaeology of South Yorkshire, not archaeology, the geology of South Yorkshire, sorry about that, is very interesting. You can see it's made up of bands of stone running down from north to south. We've got the grit stones on the left, working through to the clays on the right, which is towards the east coast. And so in the middle, we've got this band of blue, which is the band of magnesium limestone that runs down from York even. And it's the same stone, of course, and it runs right beyond the district. And it's not very wide at places. It's no more than 3 to 5 miles, really. And this gives quarries which give a marvellous creamy white stone. But we've got grit stones on the left, we've got coal measure sandstones in the middle, and we've got clays to the right, which gives us brick, of course. So I was very anxious when we were doing Doncaster to find some worthwhile brick buildings, and it's been very interesting. So this was from the Historic Environment Record. I'll be talking about that later, right at the end. But you don't just go out and wander down streets and try to find a building worth recording. You have to do some research. And so you can see that there's quite a lot of other buildings that we flagged up as possibles. David and Lorraine both helped put this map together, and you can see which ones we've actually recorded. So they've got a bit of a spread. So right at the top up here, it says LB. What do you think LB stands for? Well, it stands for Langsett Barn, and that's where we're going to begin, right on the northern edge of the district, in the Dark Peak. And we have this marvellous barn that Malcolm Birdsall did some very good drawings of. So you should be having a look now at his drawings in the book, here, which is on page 19. If you've got the book handy, it will just give you an opportunity to see. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. To actually look at some plans instead of me having to scan everything in as well, because you've got plans of every building that we're going to look at tonight. So it's worthwhile doing that, and I'll tell you which page we're on every time we are. Malcolm does his very good drawings of his rural buildings with coursing, and it actually looks like the building, if you understand what I'm trying to say. It's almost a work of art in itself. And you can see that this particular building has a very deep plinth running along the edge. Plinths are designed really to level the interior floor, but you can see this goes up quite a long way. And one has to question, why is it like that, which we haven't really done. And it is possible, of course, that there was a much older timber frame barn here, and this might be a remnant of a plinth to support a sill beam, but I don't really know. I can't really say that, but I am doing, just to give you a bit of thought. One of the most amazing things were these ventilators, which you can see with this pointed arched head. That's extraordinarily unusual, I think. Inside, the windows were all with a beam over those ventilators, not windows, the ventilators, and they were stock chamfered, which I thought again was unusual. And right in the gable end, we had the another one with the date 1621 on, which is always very reassuring to actually see the date of a building. And Langsett was an interesting village because it had other such barns with ventilators, but not with the Gothic arch, ones with a loop head like this. This is in the village of Langsett. It's a barn conversion. You can see the peak park have been pretty tough on windows. They only get one in the existing cart entry. No roof lights either. They're all around the other side. That's part of their policy, to minimize the alteration to the building. And so you'll notice these very long coins running across, which, because the stonework is very sort of coursed rubble, very thin, flaggy stone, which is quite interesting. If you turn to page 20, and we'll just go back a little second to the, to the barn, you can see the plan of the building is like a U shape at the rear with a sort of an aisle on one side. So this is the unaisled side that we're looking at, and the aisle with a threshing floor in the middle of the building, but it's been altered by the Peak Park people as a visitor centre. So it's got a timber floor in part of it, and so there's no stone flags anymore. But it just gives you an idea of what you're looking at when you can see that. If you turn over the page, you can see that plinth that I've been going on about on page 22, and the wind braces on the back of the principal rafters, which come down to the wall plate. We've got a post with curved braces to it. So we'll leave that particular one. It wasn't the only barn that we looked at and recorded. In Concord Park, which is on the outskirts of Sheffield at Shiregreen, is a barn that's used by the Parks Department, who could store all their equipment in it. And by the white van here is that particular building. If you want to know where we are in the book, let's just flick through till we get it. It's turn to page 35, if you would. You'll find that the most useful page for now. So it's got crooks inside, and sorry, I'll go back. So we're looking towards the end of the barn, and at the other end of the barn, we've got something quite different. We'll look at that separately, with slots here for timber framing or some sort of division, and this wall also has mortise holes in the soffit of its tie beam. So we'll move on. South Yorkshire was looked at by lots of people early on in the 20th century, and Bunker was a very famous sort of chap who tried to do a sort of way of how do you look at such things, such buildings. And we've got these different types of apex pieces. You can see that one's crossed and cradles the truss, cradles the roof ridge in a sort of diamond fashion, and that's what we've got here. So it's a type 1 barn. At the other end of the building, we've got this closed studding and some wattle and daub mixed in, and well, it's a bit intriguing. And this was a gable end. This might have even been a window, but It probably wasn't. It's probably got some missing. And if we look at the next one, we can see what's in the book on page 35, more or less the same photograph. Here you can see these mortise holes. What are they for, and what's this going on about? Well, if it was partly a house, this could well have been the connection for a fire hood. And you might say, well, it's a long way up, and it certainly is. However, you're going to see a real fire hood tonight that we found in another building, and they were really quite remarkable constructions. So it's a thought-provoking barn. Nearby the barn is another interesting house at Hatfield House, it's called, at Shiregreen. And this house was said to be the oldest box frame building in the Sheffield, near to the Sheffield centre. So we went to see it specially, and it took a while to get in. People are never there when you want them to be. And eventually we got in, and they couldn't have treated us more nicer. But when we actually looked at the building, it was very confusing. You look at this and you see the posts coming down and say, well, how many bays is it? We've got 1 there, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit of a one. Oh, no, that's a drain pipe. And then we got this bit that's set back at a funny angle. What's going on here? And so that took a lot of figuring out. And so we do recommend that you look at the drawings that were done starting on page 49. You'll see the plan of the building, which is very revealing. And on figure 76 on page 50 shows that we've actually had a wing here running in the opposite direction. So that's like the end of a gable that's run the other way, and the roof has gone into it in this particular way. We discovered that this was all false. This was fake. All the posts and this pretend brace was made of concrete and painted black. It was quite extraordinary, really, because it looks like the real thing. You look down here, here's a post and brace and the mid rail running across, and that looks okay. So this guy's copied that with this exact same detail and put it on, but this is not timber framed at all. So you have to not take things as read, really, and you have to look at it very carefully yourself. Inside that main room, we had a scarf jointed spine beam indicating a fire hood, and some sort of wavy old beams, I think, and there was a built-in cupboard which was rather lovely, and they found a wooden flute on the top of it when they were restoring the building, so it's been there a long time. And upstairs and built out, we've got posts and huge timbers of one sort or another, which would merit, I think, a dendro survey at some point in the future. We've got more timber framing here. This is another truss running across. We can see this end truss that's in with the bedroom going on, and it's got infilling brickwork. But the attrition of the timber, which is the wear on it from weather, you can see the timber's absolutely, it's not as if it's just been protected all its life. It's had a hard life outside. And that's so we actually realized that this was the end of the building, because this had been external. And you can see up there, there's a different ridge running into the existing one. That's on the other side of that brick wall, and this is on the inside of that bedroom. And you can see this has been scarfed on with a different piece of timber entirely to extend that particular type of building. And so there were 2 trusses, and they were numbered with this sort of little gouged numbering system from a chisel, which I found particularly interesting. People will have seen this before, but it's worthwhile noting when it happens. Instead of using Roman numerals, it's a different way of doing it. So let's look at this end bit. if you go around the corner, it's actually a stone building. You can see it is running up to this bit of the building that it carries on. So that's where it stopped originally. So that's quite amazing. So we'll move on again. As I said, it's a rapid survey, is this. So we move into the Derwent Valley to the village of Upper Midhope. And so we look at this first one that David Cant did a survey of. Let's see if we can find that one. Where is it? Here it is. Right. There's some very good drawings of the building on page 25 of the book. And there's a plan of it on 26, which you'll find very helpful. So just have that open and I'll guide you along through the building. So here we have two bits of a building, an L-shaped building, 18th century extension onto a 17th century core, but not really obvious. What I find really confusing is this chimney stack has this very nice chimerecta moulding that you would associate with a 17th century chimney stack, and this one has an 18th century chimney stack as if they're the wrong way round. I can't answer that question. This has had a fire hood originally, and so maybe that wasn't taken out until the 18th century when they built this, and why they moved the chimney I don't know, but that's what it looks like has happened. So we'll move on. It's a rather attractive building. It caught my eye many years ago, back in the 1970s, when I used to travel this way down to the Strines and over into Derbyshire to Bakewell, looking for antique furniture, actually, if the truth be known. It's got these very interesting and decorative label stops. So this is the original door, and if you look at the plan, you'll see that that's how it's indicated. But these are two different designs, and I've missed out a bit of the building that's there because I think it's a complete 19th century rebuild. So let's look at the detail. This doorway may well have led originally into a pub, into an inn, but that might not be because it's sort of the inn that we think of. It might be because many farmers had secondary occupations, and they may well have brewed beer and sold it to the local inhabitants. But we've got this quite complicated design with a cross in the middle. And so this is an inserted door. It's not original, but it wasn't a pub till the 19th century. More of that anon. This is the original door with the window here with label stops, and the door with a cross as well. And this little recessed panel is dated 1671. And if you go into there, you will see that the plan shows that it enters into a little lobby, an entrance lobby. And what's amazing is that it enters into the former house body, and it was written about in the 30s by Addy in this book, The Evolution of the English House, and he put this photograph in of the house as it was, and we've got a table with beautiful carving. This is called guilloche decoration, and behind it is a seat fixed to this screen, this wooden panelled wall, and we've got a long bench there. And what they did, he actually drew where all the furniture was in the house. Now, I've never seen this anywhere else. We've never done this before, but it's a very interesting thing to consider. This is original furniture that was there before the Second World War. The book came out, I think, 1938 or 32. I can't quite remember. There's the table marked K. K is the table. There's the bench. This is the fixed bench to the wall. This was a Delft plate rack on there. And here's the spear truss, or the spear or screen that you entered into. And there was a round table there. And there was reference to the servants eating at that end and the farmer sitting here like Lord of the Manor by the fire and enjoying the heat. Sounds a good idea to me. But this bit became the inn, and it had this very odd staircase at one point, which they removed. It was very dangerous. It was a very steep log staircase, and there was a photograph of it, and it was removed in the 18th century, which we'll see about in a minute. In the house is this very sort of badly done scarf joint, showing where there's been a fire hood, and it's you can see it's sort of separating almost. It sort of indicates there was a fire hood there. And here we have this marvelous wooden screen wall against which you would have sat on the other side with the table that you've seen the photograph of. So we're looking through from what became an inn into the house body, or the private bit. And there is a door between, but it was left open so you could see this. And it's these ceiling beams which are really amazing. They're completely covered in graffiti, dating from, and if you're looking in the book, it's on page 27, you can see more of this graffiti, and dating from the 40s, 1840s to 50s. You can just about make out 1847 then. And people seem to have put the date when they were there. It's sort of quite interesting, 1851, February something or other, and their names, and they're marked on 8 of the 11 joists, which is quite amazing, I think. So these were photographed as part of the record. It was a crook frame building, and these crooks were visible upstairs, but not downstairs as such, not easily anyway. And so it's for the front bit of the building. And these have been dendro dated to the 1550s. So we know that there was a timber frame building there at that date. And you can see where the open mortises are here, which were where a sort of purling would have been on the back of this, that's been removed when the roof has been altered and raised and flattened out as well. But quite interesting. You can see that this tie beams had to be cut so you could get under it without really knocking yourself out. It's still pretty low. So there it is. So this is what they did in the 18th century. They built this rear wing on, which gave them extra accommodation and a posh sitting room, a new cellar and some bed chambers. And so we've got flat face mullion windows, raised plat-bound, we've got coins, and we'll see more of this in a minute. Inside the windows, this has got a nice corner cupboard and shutters with a little circle cut out that you put your hand in to pull it out of the pull the shutter out of the wall. And I suppose it lets a little bit of light in as well when the shutters are shut. And they put a new staircase in, replacing the dangerous one in the other room, with flat balusters and a little window on the half landing at the back of the building. And we had this long sloping cat slide roof with a corridor really in this bit. You can see originally that must have been a second thought, because the Neela stops there. So the building has come down there and then was extended a bit further. And so it's an L-shaped building with this long sloping roof. They like cat slide roofs in this part of the world, we discovered. And this is a team, the recording team. So we've got Josh, David Cant, Lorraine, Barry, our president, Sue, and Gunhild. And so it's nice to see the group who actually drew up these plans that you might have at your fingertips right now. So it takes a lot of dedication and time and concentration, not conservation, looking at this stuff. We now move on to Fairhouse. So in the book, where is it? I think it's before that one. Yes, it is. If you turn to page 14, there's a very good drawing of the front of the house that you can't see yet, and we've got this long outbuilding, which was recorded, and this is a listed building description of the outbuilding, garage and stable, a listed garage. How about that? But it looks more like a longhouse, which you find in North Yorkshire. Peter Ryder was very interested in crook framed buildings, and so he recorded this one, but not the house itself, because it didn't fall within his research agenda. So it's a bit of a ropey building with a big hole knocked into it for parking your car. And the car that was parked in there was a very interesting vintage car. I think it was an old Riley, if memory serves. And you can just see one of the photographs of one of the crooks. Well, what Peter Ryder did, he did a complete survey of the building and of all the crooks. And they weren't, he probably did this on his own, which is what he was quite clever at doing. And he sketched these crooks, and he was very good at almost doing a very accurate drawing, without actually having lots of other people having tapes and everything. He sort of, and these little dotted lines mark the wind braces if they existed, which is quite interesting. And so it just a little bit of a detail showing it, which is quite good, I think. And so he shows the diamond set ridges which are cut through here. It shows the purlins running across, an open saw cut for a low timber, probably is out to an aisle post. And this is the house itself. It's a very splendid looking house. And so if you move from that garage to this, it really is indeed a big leap in both social status and comfort. And Stanley Jones, who we have all heard of, I'm sure, did a sketch plan 40 years ago, and this was in the HER in Sheffield when I was doing it, circa 1675 to 85. Well, we can be a bit more accurate than that, I think. But you can see the basic plan. We've got a bressumer forming an inglenut fireplace, the door entering against the fire screen here, and a parlour here, service rooms at the back. If you go back and see, we had a long sloping roof at the rear. You've got this disparate roof pitch, which is really for service rooms at the back. And it's very interesting, really. So here's the door opening into the inside of the fire screen, which is a stone one. And it's a lovely original door, what we call a cross-boarded door. So on the back, the boards are running in the opposite direction to the ones at the front. And you nail the two together. And it's got a big drawbar to go across that the owner has restored. I think that was missing, to be fair. So it makes it fairly impregnable for people who want to get in. Though he never shuts his door, it's always open. Probably shuts it at night. It has a little window in the screen, and it's a delightful building, is this. And so this is what you see when you go in. There's the little entrance lobby with this long bressumer with an arch cut in at one end for the doorway. This is a very characteristic feature of South Yorkshire. It's not a characteristic feature of West Yorkshire at all. But we see this again, and you can see the top of the fire hood starting there. And we've got a little wall cupboard there, which is probably for salt, but we'll see more of this anon. Between the two rooms is a dated piece of panelling that's either carved or inlaid. I can't quite make my mind up. And a little bit of research has revealed that TR is Thomas Revel, and the date 1687 would seem to record the time when he actually restored his built this house really as a complete new build. It's a one date building really, which is quite rare and quite interesting. So if we just go on, it has this stone spiral staircase. Well, I'd never really seen a stone spiral staircase except maybe 3 in the whole of West Yorkshire, but we see quite a few of these in South Yorkshire. And it's a 2.5-story building, and the top story to the attic had a wooden spiral staircase with this very nice flat baluster design running around the outside of the top of the stairs so you don't fall down it. And you can see that the newel post is octagonal. And this is the fire hood as it goes up to each story. This is at the first floor, and this is at the attic floor, which I think is quite amazing that it's survived. Well, it's been restored, and it's not entirely original, but it was very exciting seeing it for the first time and thinking it was original. We like to be conned once in a while. And here's this piece of wood at the top, this little collar that has the mortises that the timbers go into. So it helps make sense of these other timbers that we've just looked at, the barn at Concord Park, with the same sort of idea. So we move on again, and we're going to look at White House now. Did you look in, before we go, did you look at this book here? David did an amazing drawing showing the fire hood completely restored as it is, rising off the back of the Bessemer. I think it's a marvelous building, photograph, drawing. Get there eventually. And it has a smoking box, which I've not illustrated. I can't illustrate everything, which was used for hanging hams and herbs and things for drying them, which I think you can see in the book there. So I think it's an exceptional building of great interest. When I went to the historic environment record in Sheffield at a place called Howden House, not far from the university, I discovered various files on various buildings, and this was in the file dating from the 1970s, showing excuse me, I'll be stopping to breathe, that's my problem. So we went and had a look at this. These were the photographs that were in the file. We took a lot more photographs, which I'm not going to show you. You can see that it's got 2 rooms at the front and a door, not dissimilar to the plan of the one at Upper Midhope. So I think it helps you understand. And at the side we have another long sweeping outshut to a single story, well, a little bit more than a single story. So we have a 2-room plan with an outshut, and what's in that outshut? Well, I'm going to show you one of the plans which was done specially, that helps you understand the building better. This is a sort of plan that's been redrawn by David Cook from the original survey by Roger Lambert, a very good drawing of the building. So we've got a mason, well, it's actually brick wall, is that? We've got huge big beam running over the windows, one single continuous beam, a parlour and a house body, and a scarf jointed beam there. And the rear has a staircase in this midpoint, and this was described as a former pantry. It may well have been a bit more than that. It might have been a cheese house originally. It had stone slate slab shelves, maybe 4 or 5 of them in rows running around 2 sides of it. And that was saved in a photograph, and it was a stone flagged room and obviously very cold. Well, the gentleman who lived there has turned this into a very nice, attractive room, and he has a workshop attached to it. So he's altered it by putting a doorway through. So his kitchen's in this bit, and it's open up to the roof is the kitchen. And so we can see it's 2 bedrooms and a bathroom with a corridor at the first floor and a post that's a single post there with a brace that supports a single roof truss, but then it has minor trusses running across to support it. So there are 3 divisions to the ceiling. So it's very interesting, I think. but it's sort of typical of the maybe second half of the 17th century in this part of the world. We'll move on to Carbrook Hall, which was a building that I had to sort of look at in some sort of detail with the help of others, which was very good, really. We had quite a lot to try and do in a very short time. So here we have something that tells us a little bit about Carbrook Hall. Was once a much larger house, this wing being added in the 1620s. Here lived Colonel John Bright, famed for his part in the taking of Sheffield Castle by Parliament in the Civil War. And you can see this nice plinth. It's a building with entirely cross-mullioned windows. If we think it's 1620, that's very early for cross-mullioned windows. We'll look that this drawing appeared in a book by Bloor, a sort of reference book, which was, and this got demolished. And David Hay, in one of his books, said that this is what remains of this building, but he got that wrong, and we just couldn't make this building work for that building. It just didn't look the same one, really. Yes, it had 2 bays of windows, and there he stopped. Everything else was odd, so we couldn't really work it out. And then we discovered that there was a reference in some document or other to a plan in Beverley Archives. So that's a long way, but Belinda and Nick went off to go and have a look at it, and it completely altered our interpretation of the building. Here's the plan that they discovered, and so I'm trying to just move everybody out of the way for the moment. Oh, that's all right. Hello, Chris. And you can see the back of the building is this sort of like hammerhead type, almost like a mallet addition onto the back of the building. And you've got this building with a gap between it and all these other marks superimposed on it for an alteration that was proposed in 1794, where they were proposing bringing a coal road right through the middle of it, which would have been, and this is a main road between Sheffield and Rotherham, so it was quite handy. Andy Bauer, who did the listing in South Yorkshire, he is quite a historian in his own right, and he got taken on with this building as well, and did his own research in Sheffield Archives and found another couple of maps, including this one by Henry West of earlier, 1712, and you can see here they were talking about this road for a long time. A proposed road through the Lathe Flat, and then another coal road through West Farm, etc. Same road continued through somebody else's land, and so the plans even included little sketches of the buildings. So this is the U-shaped plan of the building, but he didn't show the one that was obviously there. I don't know why, but it's not shown there. And there's these outbuildings, and quite interesting, really, because here's one that's not very much later, 1771, and there you can see definitely that building survives. Previously, you can see that there's been all these trees, maybe a little orchard, that's sort of still growing quite well to the left of the building there. And so it's so Andy got very taken on trying to work out how this drawing had been done in the first place, and so he worked out the viewpoint with reference to the building that we knew was there behind it, and you could just see that gap, which is this gap here, and there's a building joining that building to this one, which was added later. And so we started to interpret the building in an exciting sort of way. And Andy did this drawing that showed the little gables and everything. So we'll look at that. Here we seem to have a medieval timber framed wing older than the hall, which is with these decorative framing, which is probably mid 16th century. I've suggested 1570, and a stone wing of maybe the second quarter of the 17th century. So this is how we start to interpret this building. So you've tacked this separate building onto that one with a linkage, and that linkage must have been a passageway, possibly even a staircase going up 2 stories, up to the first floor. Sorry, I don't mean. And you linked that with the other one at some point. So here's the link, and here's the original building, which is more or less square. And what I want you to notice is this plinth running round. That wasn't visible before. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here's the drawing again, showing the addition at the back. And this link was joined up with a new building eventually. Where you get buildings like this on development plans, they show another bit of what is proposed to be built. And so this is the link bit that was going to be put on in the 19th century. And they were going to knock their building down and turn this into a pub, celebrating Carbrook Hall as an inn, and leave the stables, which were probably very useful at that particular time. But this plinth was revealed during construction work, where they lowered the ground and pointed it up with lime mortar, and included even a replica of the bronze ventilator grills to the underside of the floor, which suggested the floors were actually timber, not stone flagged. But if you compare the plinth that you've just seen, this sort of rubble plinth, with the one on the main entrance front, it's ashlar. And the whole of the fenestration of this is 19th century. It's all fake to look like Jacobean. And there's that other building that kinks out, that's at a funny angle, the way the two have been joined on. And so Andy Bentham's a very good photographer, and his photographs are far better than mine, and he's very kindly shared them with us. So there's the plinth, and this is the rubble stone plinth of the other building that was described as a house and joined on to that. So all these windows that look 17th century aren't, because we know what was in it. But at some point around here would have been a corridor coming out to link to the original building, and at the first floor as well. So it's now a Starbucks, because the pub was derelict. It fell into bad use, and the planners passed permission for it to be converted to a Starbucks drive-in. You might flinch at the very thought of that, but actually it worked very well. So there's their logo with a bike shed and this little order point for your takeaway coffee or whatever as you drive through. So this is your drive through from the main road and out again. But you could sit, drive in and park. That was the idea, and go to the interior. So this was all very neatly done with stone flags. This is a new ashlar faced extension, and this was as they were building it. A steel frame to support the structure, and we noticed this block doorway. This was while we were actually doing this recording. It took me days to get permission to get in. They kept turning us away, but eventually we did get in. Perseverance is great. And here we are looking at it. Here I am, believe it or not, looking like Compo, And here's Roger, who did his plans, and I just said, we're just a bit like an L.S. Lowry painting of the Vernacularists or the Last of the Summer Wine. If you don't laugh at yourself, it's better to do that, isn't it? And here's Andy exploring this doorstep. So we've decided that it had steps out to this particular one. So it was quite interesting. This was a plan that we came up with, showing the building, but what it doesn't do is colour it in or cross hatch it to show the phasing of the building. So this is probably 17th century. This is 17th century, but this bit's 19th century. But as it's drawn as it is, there's nothing to tell you that, except the report. So maybe we have to be more colourful in future and colour plans in a little bit. Why, you might ask, did we even come to record this building? Well, researching in the HER, I saw this cutting of this incredible panelled room, and I wanted to know, is it still there? I couldn't really believe it, or has it been ripped off and the building had been closed for years? And of course, stuff like this is very vulnerable to theft and things. But we did get in, and here we are on the recording day. And so it was sadly neglected, in the process of being restored in inverted commas. It had doors missing, gaps in panelling, and we had previously found this drawing of this fireplace, which is such a remarkable design, not least of all because of this long leaf design, like daisies with a sort of leaf shape on the flower head at the top. Well, we were to see another fireplace almost identical when we visited Cutler's Hall in Sheffield on one of our talks that we held at the showroom cinema. And you can see it has this extraordinary shaped bit here that they have in the same way. And there you can see that this had, like this, had finials, big spiky spikes. And obviously this is by the same carpenter or from the same workshop, however you want to describe it. What was fortunate is this isn't dated, but this one is. And so let's look at the date of that. This is the inner thing, and you can just make it out, 1623. So 1620 seems to be a good date for that particular building. And this is at this was at Norton House and was moved to this position. And this is the centre of the fireplace, which is very intriguing. Andy did this. He worked out what all the words said, which psalm it was, that was proverbs and things. Understanding is a wellspring of life. And he noticed that some were deliberately gone wrong. That there was Psalm 16 that was actually Psalm 32, and they'd swapped them round, the dedication here where it says it. And he wondered whether or not this was sort of indicating the date of the building. So here you can see the 16, and on the other side was 32. So this should have been 32 and 16. I don't know why they did that but we see be not as a horse and mule, which have no understanding, is what it says. So it's a good thing to say, don't be stubborn and dogged, and be a bit more subtle in your thoughts and things. So I turned this slide on its side so you could actually read it. And so there we are. This is a mystery in itself. You can see that the fireplace was altered in the 20th century with this wonderful piece of work from a Georgian fireplace that was put in with a nice dental cornice. So here we had the drawing showing the same sort of feature on this side that's been lost now when they bashed a doorway through when it was an inn, because the bar was in this corner and it was approached from the other side. Ambler did this drawing even of the panelling wrapping round the window embrasure, and you can see that the panelling was not in very good condition. It needed restoring, but it got restored when it was done for its present use by Starbucks, but not restored by them, but by the owner who leases it to them. And he put leaded lights in, restored everything with the metal bars. I think it's really quite special. This coffered ceiling, which was a bit garishly painted, probably in the 1920s, we thought, was that's as it was when we went in originally. But I don't know if you've noticed the difference. Here, there's no doorway. There's no door. We found it upstairs in a back room, and I insisted on bringing it down so we could photograph it in situ. There it is. So it's been photographed to show what it would have looked like originally. And so this is a blocked doorway that probably led to the original house. And Ambler did a drawing of this, of both sides of the door on the same drawing, which is a bit clever. So this is on the other back of the door, and this is on the front, if you like. And it has this same little fleur-de-lis design, which is very distinctive. You can see it there. And so Ambler did this amazing drawing. He obviously was very impressed with this, and there's a great deal of work involved in actually being able to do a drawing like this to scale. It's not something that the YVBSG can do, I don't think. It would take hours of work. So the ceiling was painted white and looked immediately a lot better. We got Andy Bentham to come and photograph it again in a minute. But what it lost, of course, when they painted it was the coat of arms with the heraldic tinctures of the Bright family that lived there. So you might think that would be enough. In most places it would be. But upstairs was another room. And the other room, I couldn't believe it, had this star on the door, which was extraordinary. But this door appeared to have been downstairs, because it had the same design of panelling as the downstairs, but not as the upstairs. A puzzle. So here's the door as you approach it. And I said, the Star Chamber. Well, the Star Chamber is a government office, if you like, and we think it must have been inlaid underneath all this gloss paint. It probably is inlaid in different woods. And so Andy did this drawing to try and indicate how we thought it might have been. So it's a bit special. And then you go in the room and it has this extraordinary fireplace with an amazing overmantel, which is very curious. It has these figures like herms, they call these, but what's the caryatids. What's funny about them is that you can see the feet of the character as if he's climbed inside this wooden shape. Rather than, normally they don't do that. It's sort of a figure rises out of it, but this makes it quite humorous in my book. And it has this central feature of an oval with a stork in it and a snake. Allegorical, we think, probably. Good triumphing over evil or something to that effect. And again, one of Andy Bentham's excellent photographs. Here we are trying to make sense of the building, taking some interior measurements at the first floor. And the panelling is quite small, but it's quite unusual. It has this stencil decoration and this other decoration. We'll see more of that in a minute, but we're a bit intrigued in one of the window openings was this little oak tree. You can see these are oak leaves, and you can in this plasterwork, and you see these particular ways of doing it, notches. Well, we'd seen that before, and here it is. We'd seen it here in Bishop's house on the other mantle. So I think this is not an oak one. This is different with this broadleaf design, but the treatment of the tree is the same. So that's really quite fascinating to me, that the same plasterer probably did both of them. If you follow that again, yeah, we'll move on. Now look at this. This is the design has been painted on, rather than spend lots of time and money inlaying all this. It would take months of work. It sort of suggests a sort of rush job. They wanted it highly decorated as quickly as possible, and so it was painted on by a very skilled painter. That's how I interpret it. And this decoration up here would have been done with a template placed over it and painted through to knock off these decorative panels that would normally be inlaid in different woods. But it's sort of quite unusual. Well, the other end of the building that was drawn in the original drawing had, we discovered, been a kitchen, and it had these arches on either side of a central fireplace position, and this had both a set pot here, which was for boiling things, and a domed beehive oven in that bit. And so this became part of Starbuck's proper decoration, and this was in the process of where it was being done, being cleaned out, and suddenly here we are. It's the coffee shop, all cleaned up with a nice new engineered oak floor, which I didn't think looked too bad at all. And suddenly we've got customers, which was quite interesting. I did ask them if they minded if I took their photograph. They said, no, it's all right, as people would say in Sheffield. And so the linkage that was added in the 19th century from that building to the other one, which is in here, became the servery for the interior part of the coffee shop. And they had excellent, delicious cakes. And this chap just happened to be there, and he was a Paralympian, which was just a bit of a surprise. So the coffee shop is there, but when you go through into it, here's Andy Bauer, and we agreed to meet up here and discuss it and see what they'd done to it when it was finally opened as a coffee shop. And Andy had been doing lots more research, and he had stuff to show me. And this was a customer who was fascinated by our conversations and joined in. So we've got a big table in the middle of the room, and that made me think, well, I bet this room did have a big table for discussing the campaign of the Cromwellian army in the north. And in Carbrook Hall is a fabulous six-legged table, which may well have, who's to say, but it may well have had a table similar to this. You cannot say was this table, because I don't think we have the history of this particular table. It's been acquired by the Cutler's Hall, which primarily is a 19th century building. So things have been brought in, but it's a very fine table, and it shows something of the local decoration. So what do it say about this? The listing says it was used by parliamentary forces as their headquarters during the siege of Sheffield Castle, thought to date from as early as 1623, based on a dated fireback, initialed SB for Stephen Bright. He was the bailiff of Hallamshire and Lord of the Manor of Eccleshall. His son, Sir John Bright Bart, Baronet, was a colonel in the Parliamentary Army and fought alongside his contemporary William Spencer, a lieutenant colonel described as of Attercliffe and Bramley Grange that we'd recorded the year before. So he would have probably met him here at Carbrook during the Civil War. So that's not the end of it. Andy had discovered an inventory which was dated 1663, when in fact the whole Civil War thing was over as far as restoration of Charles II. He was gunning for people who'd chopped his dad's head off. And so this building was totally abandoned, and then it was leased out. And this was part of the lease agreement. So there's the date. Andy had worked out what it all was, and I've done it in white so you can see what it says in the little parlour. The parlour doors with 2 window shuts, meaning shutters. In the study, there's in the study, with 1 spring lock and bolt for the door. This is what was left in the building, was actually the doors and locks. In the best chamber, a cupboard in the stairs. So a mention of stairs in the best parlour. Well, that what we've just been looking at was probably the best parlour. And in the new building, 1 striking clock. So that's pretty interesting. Clocks were an expensive item, particularly in 1663. So here we have the panelling all cleaned and polished and looking good. It's been a marvellous restoration, I think. And it has these tall sunflower pilasters, which are very similar to in this building at Bramley Grange, which has similar oak panelling. And what it does, it covers up this side of the building, does the panelling with cross-mullioned windows, which is a bit of an unusual thing to do, suggesting to me that it came from another location. Did it come from Carbrook? I don't know. It's difficult to say. But here we have what we've got in Bramley Grange, and you'll see we've got the same strange propeller design over a flower head. Clearly, all different, similar leaves, obviously from the same workshop, or even by the same carpenter, because we have this little detail of this little swirly capital on both of the tops here with a bracket rising up. And not only that, we've got this decoration, which if you see also occurred in Carbrook. That was part of the panelling in Carbrook before it was cleaned, and you can see it's virtually the same design, this bracket, to make it up. Unfortunately, because it was put behind, the panelling was put in front of those windows, it was very damp and it got dry rotting, this particular piece of panelling, and the owner just tried to do his best to keep the same pattern and design, but he couldn't afford to do it as a completely new panelled room. But he did a pretty good effort, and it was already painted white by the time he bought the house. So why I know about this is I was a conservation officer for Rotherham who dealt with his applications and came and saw this astonishing fireplace upstairs in the same building. We've got a late 17th century Bellectual moulded fireplace with a very nice little detail here, and set inside an older one with an extraordinary overmantel with carved figures on. Various books say all sorts of rubbish, like it represented the Holy Trinity. Well, I said it clearly can't have represented the Holy Trinity because that's a woman. Is that, unless God's a woman? Yeah, I don't think that's possible. This is probably a priest holding his a goblet for the wine. This is Hope, a woman holding a bird to release, and this woman with babies, you know, children. Charity, faith, hope and charity seems a much better idea than the other. So here was the hit list that I showed you right at the beginning of the buildings that we looked at. So that meant I'd already identified these buildings as potential buildings to record. So we came across other buildings that I'd looked at Upper Midhope, Wellbank Farm. There's a crook frame building with a fire hood, remains of, and a long bressumer being cut with an arched head for the lobby entrance, just like Fairhouse, and a stone spiral staircase like Fairhouse, and an oak panel wall. But this is before we'd seen Fairhouse, so we didn't know about that at the time. And so, unfortunately, we didn't get permission to record it. Well, we did. The lady changed her mind. And so this was one of my notes, what the sort of thing I did when I went into the HER. Upper Midhope is worth visiting. Number of listed buildings: Manor House, Townhead, cottages, Wellbank Farmhouse, etc. Manor Farmhouse was one that we went and knocked on the door and persuaded the people there, very nice people, if we could record it properly. That was done. I've shown that illustration. There was a crook frame barn that we were very keen to see, but it was unstable. It was very dangerous and was in danger of falling down. So we didn't feel we could let our members go in. And this was the crook frame farmhouse and cottage Wellbank Farm, a stone spiral stair and panelling. So let's have a look at it. This is the courtyard, an L-shaped block. With a bit of research, we found older photographs of the same thing. Here's this building with an arched doorway. Here's the cottage. That's the interesting one. It's like a single-story building with a strange sort of roof detail. And that's the owner moving into it. I don't know what that noise is. That came as a complete surprise. So you can see the building and walking into the entrance lobby, and this is looking from the entrance lobby into the house body, which this is part of the Bessemer beam with this enormous arched head and a window lighting the ingle nook. And this is the door that's on this one that's open, and you can see the shape of the crook there inside. Going into the parlour from that same lobby is a har-hung door, a very ancient way of making doors. So you make a door frame and then nail boards to it. And you can just see the spiral staircase next to it. Here we are in the house body with this enormous Bessemer with a curved head. So it allowed you to get in and sit inside it, because it'd be the warmest part of the house. And there's a little window here, so you'd be able to read your newspaper if you had one. Not in the 17th century, of course, I'm being facetious. But you can see the huge shape of this crook, immense timbers, and this enormous spine beam with a broad chamfer on. And we were very keen to record this building, but we didn't get permission. In the end, we just didn't manage it. This was remnants. There was a hole in the ceiling, you know, a bob hole, and looked up and you could see remnants of where the fire hood had been going up to the roof. And at the far end of the wall was this long panelled wall separating off a building that you'll see in a minute. So this was a stone spiral staircase, and the other side of that wall was this chimney breast with a very nice Tudor arched, almost flat Tudor arched fireplace. And this was its ceiling with square cut joists and spine beams with a chamfer. So that's the parlour end. And this was the L-shaped bit, and it stuck out a bit further with another door, possibly the original door in the later 17th century when they'd extended the building. And now somebody built this hedge, and of course you can't see the windows anymore, but except obliquely. And so it would have been quite a complicated job getting 3 owners to agree to us record it. We did get 2 of them to agree, but without the other one it seemed pointless. But we may go back another time and see if she'll change her mind. So this is your invite reminder, really, that we are intending recording more buildings in the Doncaster area, and this is just to perhaps stir you to consider coming and looking at what we've found to record in Doncaster. Everything is very unusual, very interesting, but we've found some brick buildings that we need to record. One which might be even Tudor in origin, as a monastic grange that was then converted in the 17th century to a bigger house with an L shape. They liked L shapes in this part of the world, which was quite unusual. So please consider coming and helping us. I think we would much appreciate your help, and help us to put more dots on this map. These are the recorded buildings that we have done. The red ones are the agricultural buildings that we've done. So we've got a scattering of those. So but most of them are houses of one sort or another. And so this is Doncaster, and this is North Doncaster, which is a very interesting area. So I think, well, we're nearly there. Yes. So thank you for your tolerance and listening to me drone on for over an hour and a quarter. And so we've come to the end, and I ask, are there any questions? So let's close this down.